Sit down, nothing. Those three words, spat out by President Donald Trump, the 47th Commander-in-Chief, didn't just echo through the chamber, they shook millions watching live. In America today, over 62% of citizens say they no longer trust politicians. And nearly 1 in 3 Black Americans report experiencing racial discrimination in public institutions. That's why what happened inside this hearing wasn't just a clash of words, it became a symbol. On one side, Trump, wielding the power of the presidency like a weapon. On the other, Jasmine Crockett, branded nothing, standing as a warrior of justice for every voice silenced by inequality. This is not politics as usual. This is a battle that exposes the raw, ugly truth about power, race, and justice in America. And it all begins with those three words. Sit down, nothing. Trump's voice cut through the chamber like a thunderclap, sharp and unforgiving. Every eye in the room snapped toward him. Jasmine Crockett, standing tall at the center of the grand hall, felt the words slam against her chest. But instead of recoiling, a spark ignited in her gaze. A mixture of fire, defiance, and relentless determination. The first minute of the hearing had barely passed, yet the air was already electric. Papers rustled nervously, cameras whirred, trying to capture the explosive tension. And there, amid the polished wood and glaring lights, the battle lines were drawn. This wasn't just a debate, it was a war of wills, a clash of power and justice that no one in the audience, or the millions watching live, would soon forget. Trump leaned forward, smirk curling his lips, eyes glinting with arrogance. "You think you're here to lecture me, Crockett?" he spat, voice dripping with contempt. "You're not even in the league. You're barely competent enough to stand here." His words were calculated, meant to wound, designed to belittle. But Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch, not for a second, not in the slightest. She inhaled deeply, letting the tension gather in her chest before releasing it like a storm unleashed. "Barely competent," she shot back, her voice slicing through the chamber like a finely honed blade. "Perhaps you've mistaken arrogance for authority. Perhaps you've forgotten what courage looks like, hiding behind a title while the people suffer." Gasps rippled through the audience. Some spectators leaned forward in disbelief. Others covered their mouths, unsure whether to laugh or cry at the sheer audacity on display. Cameras swiveled rapidly, capturing every flicker of expression, every micro-reaction on the faces of senators, reporters, and the few who dared approach the edges of the chamber. The room itself seemed to hold its breath. Trump's smirk faltered for the briefest heartbeat, replaced by a twitch of irritation. He jabbed a finger toward Jasmine, his tone now sharper, a sharpened dagger of ridicule. "Courage? Ha! You call this courage? You call this justice? You're just loud and useless. You think shouting makes the truth yours? You're mistaken." Jasmine stepped forward, undeterred, letting the weight of her presence fill the room. "Useless?" she countered, eyes locking onto his. "I've seen thousands silenced, millions overlooked, and yet here I stand. If speaking for them is useless, then perhaps your definition of leadership is the real failure." A heavy silence followed. Not a single camera word, not a single whisper passed lips. The words had landed, heavy and deliberate. Then the murmurs began, a tidal wave of shock, awe, and admiration. Viewers at home leaned closer to their screens. Social media feeds started to erupt with live reactions. Hashtags of defiance, outrage, and support for Jasmine multiplied by the thousands in minutes. Trump's face darkened. He tried to regain control, slamming a fist on the polished oak table. "Control yourself, Crockett. You're playing a dangerous game." His voice boomed, resonant with authority, but the cracks in his composure were visible to everyone who dared watch closely. Yet Jasmine, calm and unwavering, held her ground. "Dangerous?" she said, her voice soft but lethal. "The real danger lies in silence, in letting injustice pass unchecked. I stand here not for myself, but for every voice that history tried to erase. That is my only weapon, and it is stronger than any title you can wield." The chamber had transformed, from a solemn, structured hall into a verbal battlefield, where words struck like blows and silence carried the weight of anticipation. Every gesture, every glance, every syllable was a weapon. And as the tension crackled, the audience, both live and at home, felt a singular, unrelenting question press against their ribs. Who will falter first? Jasmine's eyes scanned the room, capturing each senator, each reporter, each member of the public whose gaze was fixed on her. She spoke again, quieter now, almost intimate. You may try to silence us, to belittle us, to call us nothing. But one thing is clear. Truth doesn't need your approval, and justice will always rise, no matter the obstacles. Trump exhaled sharply, the air between them charged with the energy of 1,000 unspoken battles. The room seemed to vibrate, suspended between conflict and revelation. And even as Trump's staff whispered urgently beside him, Jasmine Crockett's voice lingered, echoing into every corner. She would not back down. Not now. Not ever. The cameras lingered on her face, capturing that defiant flame. Millions of viewers across the country were already hooked, hearts pounding in tandem with the rhythm of confrontation. And amid all the chaos, one subtle but vital truth settled in. The story was only beginning. If you want to witness every electrifying second of this battle and see how Jasmine Crockett faces every insult, attack, and challenge head-on, make sure to subscribe to Harrison Stories, because this is the kind of fight you won't want to miss. The moment the cameras blinked back into focus, Donald Trump had already launched his salvo. Words sharp as shards of glass flew across the chamber. He leveled accusation after accusation, political fire aimed not just at Jasmine Crockett, but at the very principles she embodied. You don't understand governance, he snapped, voice booming, reverberating against the wood-paneled walls. Your so-called fight for justice is naive. You misrepresent the people. You overstep, you meddle, and you threaten the stability of this office. The room seemed to tremble with the weight of his words. Reporters jotted frantically, microphones swiveled, and Twitter feeds exploded in real time. Every syllable from the president was designed to destabilize, to make Jasmine falter. Every eye in the chamber followed her next move, sensing that history was unfolding before them like a live wire sparking. But Jasmine Crockett was ready. Not with trembling hands or faltering voice, but with a calm that burned hotter than any fury Trump could summon. She slammed her hand down on the polished oak table, the sound echoing like a drumbeat of defiance, and leaned forward, pointing directly at him. Naive, she shot back, eyes blazing, voice unwavering. You call this naive while millions suffer under policies designed to protect the powerful and punish the vulnerable? You claim stability, yet your administration has presided over 37 documented cases of rights violations just this year alone. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Some senators exchanged nervous glances. Some journalists whispered urgently into their earpieces. The camera crews could hardly keep up with the spectacle. And outside, millions of viewers at home leaned closer to their screens, hearts pounding, thumbs hovering over refresh buttons, desperate to see the next exchange. Trump's expression flickered, first a mask of irritation, then a brief flash of doubt. But he wasn't finished. Those numbers you quote are fabricated, he shot back, finger jabbing in rhythm with each syllable. They're cherry-picked, misleading, and you, Crockett, are being used by forces you don't even understand. The audacity of his claim only fueled Jasmine further. She straightened her posture, voice steady yet filled with fire. Cherry-picked? She countered, her words slicing clean through the room. These are verified reports from independent watchdogs, nonpartisan organizations, even your own government databases. Do not try to gaslight reality just because it inconveniences you. Do not mistake fear for control. A low murmur rippled through the audience. The chamber had become a verbal arena, every gesture a move in an invisible chess game, every pause a threat, every word a blow. Trump's staff leaned forward, whispering frantically, hands covering mouths. The cameras caught it all, the twitching jaw, the subtle narrowing of eyes, the flicker of unease hidden behind bravado. Jasmine's voice rose, not in anger, but in authority. You want to talk about overstepping? She asked, gaze sweeping over the assembled senators. How about the thousands whose health care has been denied? The millions whose voting rights have been suppressed? The children left in unsafe schools? This isn't politics, it's negligence. And standing here telling the truth is the only way to stop it. The reporters began shouting over each other, scribbling headlines in real time. President and Justice Warrior clash in fiery chamber showdown. Crockett calls out Trump in explosive hearing. The air was thick with tension, every word from Jasmine landing like a strike in a high-stakes duel. Her presence radiated power, clarity, and moral authority, a stark counterpoint to Trump's performative aggression. Trump's face tightened. He opened his mouth to respond, but Jasmine didn't give him the satisfaction of silence. She pressed on, voice unwavering, pointing to the evidence before them. Charts, reports, eyewitness testimonies, all compiled meticulously over months. These aren't opinions. These are facts, she said, letting the chamber absorb the weight of each syllable. And if facts terrify you, perhaps it's time to reconsider whose interests you are truly serving. The room seemed to hold its breath again. Viewers at home leaned closer to screens, astonished at the raw intensity unfolding. Social media feeds lit up with every tweet, every clip, every GIF. Millions were now watching, not just for the clash of personalities, but for the unfolding spectacle of truth confronting power. Even Trump, accustomed to controlling narratives, felt the room shift. Jasmine Crockett, once labeled nothing, had turned the arena into a stage where her words carried more weight than any title, any office, any ceremony. The chamber wasn't just witnessing a debate, it was witnessing a reckoning. And as the microphones continued to pick up every strained breath, every deliberate pause, Jasmine lowered her hand from the table, letting the silence hang heavy, almost tangible. Then with a calm that could ignite storms, she concluded, "You may throw accusations, wield authority, and scream until your voice breaks. But justice isn't intimidated, and truth will always find a way." The cameras lingered on her, capturing the defiant light in her eyes, the unyielding set of her jaw. Millions of viewers were now hooked, hearts racing with anticipation, minds desperate for the next blow in this epic confrontation. And as headlines screamed, tweets trended, and the nation watched, one undeniable truth emerged. Jasmine Crockett had struck back, and the fight was far from over. Trump's face tightened, the storm behind his eyes darkening. He leaned forward, voice low and venomous, shifting tactics with the precision of a seasoned predator. "You think standing here makes you powerful, Crockett?" he hissed, eyes narrowing. "I've heard the whispers. Everyone has. Your little career, your personal life. How clean is it, really? How can anyone trust someone with that history?" The chamber froze, not from shock alone, but from the audacity of the attack. To drag personal history into a public arena, to twist facts into weapons, to attempt to shatter a reputation with insinuation and mockery, Trump had entered a psychological battlefield. Yet Jasmine did not flinch. Not a twitch, not a falter. She tilted her head slightly, eyes locking on to his, piercing through the venom with clarity and purpose. "History," she said, calm but sharp. "Let me remind you, Mr. President, that your history is not spotless either. From questionable deals that left taxpayers bleeding billions to policies that ignored the cries of the marginalized, your record is written in consequences, not accomplishments. And yet here you are, trying to discredit someone who dares to hold you accountable." A murmur ran through the room. Reporters leaned in closer, capturing every word, every subtle flicker of expression. Cameras zoomed in, broadcasting Jasmine's unwavering gaze across the nation. Millions of viewers at home felt their hearts hammering, not just at the words exchanged, but at the sheer courage of her stance. Trump's jaw clenched. He jabbed a finger toward her, voice rising, filled with controlled rage. "You think pointing fingers erases your missteps? You think righteous speeches make up for your failures? You are—" He stopped abruptly, realizing the silence he tried to impose was being swallowed by the weight of her presence. Jasmine stepped closer, hand resting lightly on the stack of documents before her, voice rising with a rhythm that was almost musical in its authority. "Failures?" she countered, words deliberate, heavy. "If pointing out systemic injustice is a failure, then history itself has failed. If exposing corruption and greed is a failure, then truth has failed. And Mr. President, if your only strategy is to attack my character while ignoring your own misdeeds, you reveal not my weakness, but your desperation. The room vibrated with tension, thick as fog. Every breath seemed measured. Senators shifted uneasily in their seats. Staffers leaned in, whispering frantic updates. Cameras caught the smallest quiver in Trump's expression, a flash of vulnerability behind the mask of bravado. Trump attempted another assault, voice sharper, words clipped like bullets. Do you think your supporters care about ethics when you have skeletons in your own closet? Jasmine's lips curled into a half-smile, unyielding, almost serene. Skeletons, she asked. Mr. President, skeletons are visible. The crimes of your office, the deceit of your statements, the millions of people misled. They are not skeletons. They are monuments to negligence and corruption. And while you hide behind titles and theatrics, I stand here, fully exposed, unafraid, with nothing to conceal and everything to fight for. The chamber seemed to pulse with energy. Every observer, every journalist, every citizen watching remotely felt the gravity of the confrontation. This was more than politics. It was a psychological duel where words cut deeper than any gavel, and composure was a weapon as lethal as any accusation. Trump's fingers drummed impatiently on the table. His voice rose again, brittle now, strained. You overestimate yourself, Crockett. You're loud, but loud doesn't equal strength. You think your facts protect you? Jasmine leaned forward, her tone both soft and incendiary. Facts are not protection. Facts are truth. And truth, Mr. President, doesn't bend, doesn't bow, and certainly doesn't fear you. If strength is measured by the ability to confront injustice and speak it openly, then every suppressed voice, every marginalized life, and every betrayed citizen standing behind me defines true strength. A silence fell, deep, heavy, and almost holy. Even Trump's staff seemed to pause mid-motion, the audacity of her words halting their rehearsed panic. Social media exploded. Every newsfeed, every trending hashtag carried snippets of the exchange. On Crockett vs. Trump, yet justice unyielding, 9, battle for truth. Viewers were transfixed, sharing clips, dissecting her every phrase, absorbing her courage as if it were fuel to ignite their own convictions. And yet the tension remained palpable. Trump, the master of optics, had launched a psychological siege, but Jasmine Crockett had turned it back on him. Every insinuation he cast, every shadow he tried to project, she illuminated with facts, courage, and moral clarity. The chamber, once an arena of polished decorum, now felt like a pressure cooker, compressed, volatile, alive with electricity. Every heartbeat, every intake of breath, every shifting gaze contributed to a rhythm that demanded attention. Jasmine's voice cut through it all. You can attempt to weaponize fear and gossip, Mr. President, but the truth is immune to theatrics. The people, the system, the very concept of justice. These are not fragile, and they will endure, even as you try to crumble them. For the first time that day, the audience seemed to sense the unshakable force she represented. Trump's eyes flickered, not anger, not control, but calculation, as he realized that this duel was no longer about him. It was about every voice that had ever been silenced. And as the cameras panned across the chamber, catching every micro-expression, every twitch, every deliberate pause, one thing was clear. Jasmine Crockett was not just defending herself. She was dismantling the illusions of power, one carefully chosen word at a time. The psychological gauntlet had been thrown, and the nation was watching every step of the counterattack, riveted, breathless, hungry for the next blow. Trump's composure finally cracked. His jaw tightened, his face flushed crimson, and for the first time that day, the veneer of presidential control faltered. He slammed his hand onto the microphone, sending a sharp jolt through the polished oak table. Enough, he bellowed, voice booming over the chamber. The echo rattled the chandeliers above, causing a shiver to run through the audience. Papers fluttered, pens dropped, and cameras shook slightly from the intensity of the outburst. "You think you can lecture me, Crockett?" Trump roared, leaning into the microphone, eyes blazing with fury. "You think you understand power, responsibility, leadership? You are—" His voice cracked under the strain. He slammed the table again, the reverberation cutting through the silence that had briefly held the chamber in suspense. But Jasmine Crockett did not flinch. She remained perfectly poised, each movement deliberate, each breath measured. Her eyes locked on his, unwavering, and her voice was a blade wrapped in silk. "You think shouting makes the truth go away?" she said, calm, deliberate. "You think a fist on a table intimidates justice? Look around, Mr. President. The truth doesn't bend, and power without accountability is hollow." A murmur ran through the chamber, growing into a roar. Senators leaned forward, reporters scrambled to catch every word, and for the first time, the live feed could hardly keep up. Social media exploded. Clips of Trump's tantrum and Jasmine's unflinching stare went viral within seconds, trending across platforms nationwide. Trump's hand trembled slightly as he raised it to make another strike at her credibility, but Jasmine anticipated every move. She leaned in, voice slicing through the tension like a scalpel. "Every attempt to silence, every effort to intimidate, every lie thrown in my face, it only highlights the desperation behind your words. You try to drown justice in noise, but I stand here, clear, resolute, and unbroken." The chamber erupted. Some audience members cheered. Others gasped, frozen in disbelief at the intensity of the exchange. Even the veteran reporters accustomed to political theater seemed momentarily stunned. Every camera angle captured the drama, the red flush on Trump's face, the unyielding calm of Jasmine's stance, the palpable energy vibrating through the room. Trump bellowed again, pounding his fist, leaning forward until the microphone squealed. "You think facts matter when your narrative fails? You think courage means anything when the system is mine?" Jasmine's lips curled into a faint, precise smile, almost imperceptible, as if the weight of her strategy had just begun to reveal itself. "The system may belong to titles, offices, and those who wield fear," she said, measured, each word a strike. "But truth is not owned. Justice is not negotiable. And courage cannot be crushed by tantrums or bluster." The chamber had become a pressure cooker of emotion, intensity, and moral confrontation. Every glance, every pause, every subtle gesture amplified the drama. Trump's assistants whispered urgently, cameras captured every flicker of emotion, and journalists scribbled headlines in real time. Trump explodes as Crockett strikes back. Chamber erupts in fiery clash over justice and power. Then Jasmine delivered her coup de grace. She reached to the table, drawing forth a series of documents, reports, and statements. Her voice, unwavering, cut through the tension like a sharpened blade. "These are not opinions. These are documented facts, testimonies, and evidence. Everything ignored or twisted under your tenure. You cannot intimidate the truth, Mr. President. It exists independently of your outrage, your titles, and your attempts to dominate this room." The audience was spellbound. The chamber seemed to vibrate not with anger but with the electricity of revelation. Every journalist, every senator, every viewer at home felt it. The raw power of unflinching courage meeting unrestrained authority. Trump's face darkened, his bravado cracking further, while Jasmine's calm radiance seemed almost otherworldly, a force no amount of shouting could dislodge. He tried one last time, voice rising, trembling with fury. "You will regret this." But Jasmine's gaze never wavered. Regret? The only regret belongs to those who ignore justice, who silence voices, who betray their own office for personal gain. History will remember, Mr. President, not your outbursts, not your rage, but the moments when truth refused to bow. The chamber roared in response. Some spectators leaped to their feet, clapping and shouting. Others leaned forward, riveted, unable to look away. The live broadcast went wild. Every reaction, every gasp, every shouted word became a moment of viral history. And in the midst of it all, Jasmine Crockett remained steady, a lighthouse in the storm, her words striking deeper than any punch, her presence commanding respect, her strategy unfolding with precision. As the echoes of the confrontation settled into the air, a subtle reminder slipped through the tension. If you want to witness every heart-stopping second of this battle, to feel the fury, courage, and unrelenting fight for justice, subscribe to Harrison's Stories. Every update, every confrontation, every shocking twist will be delivered directly, because this is a story that refuses to be silenced. Jasmine Crockett's eyes scanned the chamber with the quiet intensity of a predator closing in on its target. For weeks, she had meticulously gathered evidence, combed through reports, obtained documents from sources both public and clandestine. Now, in front of the nation, she was ready to reveal the first piece of her secret arsenal, a classified document that could shake the very foundations of power Trump wielded so recklessly. She reached into the folder on the table before her and withdrew a thick stack of papers, bound with precision, each page a testament to hours of investigation, sweat, and unyielding courage. The air in the chamber seemed to hold its breath. Cameras swiveled, microphones leaned closer, and every reporter scribbled furiously, their pens trying to keep pace with history unfolding live. "This," Jasmine began, voice measured but sharp as a scalpel, "is the first of several documents that expose decisions made under your administration, Mr. President, which directly contradict public statements, undermine public trust, and violate federal regulations. This is not conjecture. This is fact. Verified, documented, undeniable fact." Trump's face paled, though he tried to maintain his usual arrogance. "This is fake," he barked, pounding the table again, attempting to drown out her words. "Fabricated, false, completely invented." His voice rose to a pitch that made the chandeliers tremble. But Jasmine was unshaken. She slid the document toward the center of the chamber, letting the camera lenses capture every detail, every bold heading, every stamped date. "Deny it all you want," she said, calm but with a lethal edge. "But the nation sees. Millions of Americans will see exactly what you have done, and the inconsistencies are clear. There is no wiggle room, no spin, no escape from the facts." The chamber seemed to vibrate with tension. Trump's usual smirk faltered. For the first time that day, the mask slipped. His hands fidgeted, tapping nervously, betraying the storm inside. Every eye in the room caught it, his pupils darting, his jaw tightening, a subtle but unmistakable tremor in his fingers. "You are lying. These are fabrications planted by your allies to destroy me." Trump spat, trying to reassert control, voice quivering despite the forceful projection. He leaned forward, fist slamming the table once more. But the sound seemed hollow, an echo of a crumbling fortress. Jasmine's gaze didn't waver. She leaned slightly closer, letting the intensity of her stare meet his. "Lies," she repeated, each syllable deliberate. "These are internal memos, signed, stamped, recorded, and every misstatement, every contradictory claim is documented here. You can shout, threaten, accuse, but the truth cannot be silenced by bluster." A murmur spread through the chamber. Senators leaned forward, whispering among themselves. Reporters froze mid-scribble, realizing the gravity of what they were witnessing. Outside, millions of viewers gasped, hearts hammering, as the first clip of the revelation went viral within seconds. Trump's voice grew sharper, cracking under pressure. "You are committing perjury," he shouted, gesturing wildly. "This is criminal. You will regret this." But his hands betrayed him. They shook slightly, betraying the calm authority he tried to project. For the first time, the audience could see the man behind the mask. The fear, the desperation, the knowledge that this revelation could not be spun away. Jasmine's words flowed like a precise, controlled stream of fire. "Regret?" she asked, voice steady, almost chilling in its clarity. "The only regret belongs to those who ignore accountability, those who hide behind power while the people suffer. Look at your actions, your memos, your policies. They are indisputable, and while you rage, the nation is watching. Every misstep is illuminated, every contradiction highlighted, and every attempt to intimidate is documented for posterity." The audience reacted. Some gasped, some whispered incredulously, and a few pressed their phones to capture every second of history. Social media lit up with hashtags, Russian Crockett reveals, Trump exposed, Rush justice unfolding, trending nationally within moments. The chamber itself seemed to hold a new kind of energy, a fusion of fear, anticipation, and awe. Trump tried again, voice cracking under the weight of exposure. "This is illegal. You have no right," Jasmine interrupted, voice rising just enough to cut through the chaos. "I have every right, Mr. President. Every citizen has the right to know the truth, and I will not allow fear, intimidation, or false accusations to suppress it. These documents are the first of many, and each one will tell a story of mismanagement, deception, and a failure to serve the people." The cameras lingered on Trump, capturing the subtle quiver in his hand as he tried to regain control. Jasmine's composure was a stark contrast, controlled, deliberate, a predator and protector in one frame. The nation could see it. He was rattled. His bravado faltered, and the truth now held him in its unyielding grip. And as the first documents were placed before the cameras, visible to millions of Americans watching live, the weight of the moment settled. This was no longer a verbal confrontation. It was a revelation, a reckoning, and Jasmine Crockett held the first decisive strike in a battle that would define justice and accountability for a generation. Trump's face contorted, crimson spreading across his cheeks as fury replaced composure. His hands slammed onto the oak table with a deafening crash, rattling microphones and scattering papers across the chamber. "You think you can humiliate me, Crockett? You think your little files, your so-called evidence, dictate what happens here?" His voice boomed like rolling thunder, shaking the room. "You will regret this," he roared, leaning into the microphone, every syllable dripping with raw, unrestrained anger. "I am the office. I am the authority. Do you understand the power you are challenging?" The chamber trembled under his wrath. Staffers recoiled, pens dropped, and cameras swiveled frantically, capturing the spectacle as millions of viewers across the nation held their breath. Trump's attempt to dominate through sheer force of personality was failing, and the audience sensed it. But Jasmine Crockett did not flinch. Not for a second. Her gaze was steel, unyielding, locked on his in a battle of wills. She leaned forward slightly, voice precise, cutting through the storm. "Power means nothing without accountability, Mr. President. Authority is hollow when used to silence truth. Courage does not bow to titles, and justice does not fear the crown." The chamber buzzed. Senators exchanged knowing glances. Reporters scribbled frantically, hearts racing. Viewers at home felt their pulse quicken, caught in the drama of an epic confrontation between unchecked authority and unbreakable integrity. Trump slammed his fist again, leaning close to the microphone until it squealed under the pressure. "You dare lecture me on justice?" he bellowed. "I have built, I have led, I have commanded. You are nothing. You will pay for your insolence." Jasmine's lips curled into a faint, measured smile. Not of mockery, but of quiet confidence. "Pay," she said, letting the word hang in the charged air. "Perhaps the only price belongs to those who believe fear can replace accountability. For every citizen misled, every promise broken, every voice silenced, justice will be served. Not by threats, but by truth." Trump's staff whispered urgently beside him, trying to coach him, to remind him of appearances, but his fury had outstripped reason. He gestured wildly, attempting to assert dominance, but the chamber saw through the desperation behind the theatrics. The audience began to sense a shift. The clash of raw rage and unwavering control generated a tension that felt almost tangible. Some murmurs of astonishment became audible support. A subtle current of solidarity with Jasmine began spreading through the chamber and the living rooms of viewers nationwide. Jasmine pressed her advantage, voice unwavering, each word deliberate and sharp. "Authority is not a shield against accountability. You can roar, threaten, wield every tool of power, but the people are watching. They see your attempts to intimidate. They see your fear, and they stand with justice." Trump's nostrils flared. He tried another verbal assault, but the words lacked impact. His hands betrayed him, shaking slightly, a subtle yet undeniable sign of faltering control. Jasmine, in contrast, radiated composed, lethal precision. Every glance, every pause, every word emphasized her unassailable presence. Spontaneous applause erupted from parts of the chamber, mingling with stunned gasps. Cameras struggled to capture the full intensity, but social media exploded with hashtags. Crockett stands, Wana, justice over power, Dina, Trump rage. Millions of viewers were glued to their screens, witnessing history unfold in real time. Jasmine leaned in slightly, delivering a verbal blow, her voice soft yet cutting like steel. Power is fleeting. Titles are temporary, but justice endures. Those who try to silence it, no matter how loudly they roar, will always be exposed. Fear cannot dictate truth, and rage cannot replace integrity. The chamber seemed to vibrate under her words. Trump's fist trembled, his chest heaving, his usual arrogance giving way to an unmistakable strain. For the first time, the nation saw not the powerful figure, but the man under pressure, revealed in every quiver, every flush, every faltering attempt at control. Jasmine stood tall, calm, unwavering. Her eyes swept the room, absorbing the gravity of the moment. The nation, captivated and inspired, recognized the shift. The fight for justice had found its champion, and even the most formidable rage could not topple her. The chamber fell into a tense silence, broken only by the faint rustle of papers and the collective heartbeat of millions watching. Trump's fury had reached its zenith, yet Jasmine's resolve had transformed the arena. It was clear. The battle was far from over, but the tide had unmistakably begun to turn. Then it erupted. Words collided like thunderclaps as Trump launched into his most aggressive tirade yet, voice cracking and echoing off the high ceilings. "You dare accuse me again, Crockett? You dare defy the office of the president with lies and theatrics?" His fist pounded the table in rhythm with his fury, the sound reverberating through the chamber like gunfire. Jasmine did not flinch. Her eyes, sharp as daggers, met his gaze with unyielding intensity. "Lies," she countered, voice precise and cutting. "No, Mr. President. Facts, witnesses, documents. And every time you attempt to hide, threaten, or intimidate, the truth becomes clearer, louder, and unstoppable." Trump slammed his palm onto the table one more time, scattering papers into a small whirlwind. The room shook with the force of his rage, and suddenly the security detail moved. 4 men in crisp suits approached cautiously, eyes scanning the crowd, hands hovering near their earpieces. They flanked the table, a silent acknowledgement that the confrontation had escalated beyond verbal warfare. The chamber, already thick with tension, seemed to explode. Senators leaned forward, jaws tight. Reporters scrambled to keep their cameras focused. Spectators in the gallery shouted, half in disbelief, half in exhilaration, voices overlapping, creating a chaotic symphony of awe and tension. The sound rose, almost deafening, as if the very walls of the historic chamber were vibrating with anticipation. And then Jasmine struck. She produced a folder from her briefcase, sliding it deliberately across the table. Her hand remained steady, her movements calm amidst the storm. "This is the second piece of evidence, Mr. President. Not just papers, witnesses who saw, heard, and recorded the very actions you wish to deny." A hush fell across the chamber, the noise of the crowd halting mid-shout. Even Trump faltered, eyes narrowing as he tried to process what she was revealing. "This is preposterous," he shouted, voice cracking. "Fabricated. You're making this up. It's lies." But the audience could see it. His hands twitched slightly, his jaw clenched. The anger that had once seemed unshakable was now accompanied by a subtle, undeniable tremor. His facade of control was faltering under the weight of imminent exposure. And then, the witness appeared. The chamber doors opened quietly, almost unnoticed at first, and a single figure stepped forward. A mid-level White House official, someone whose testimony had been carefully vetted and corroborated, walked toward the podium. Cameras pivoted instantly, reporters scrambling to adjust angles, flashes firing in the gallery. Every eye in the room followed the witness as they approached, a living embodiment of evidence, a human confirmation of the truths Jasmine had meticulously documented. Jasmine's eyes sparkled with controlled triumph. She gestured to the witness. voice calm but carrying across the chamber with clarity. This individual will corroborate the timeline, the decisions, and the actions that were attempted to be hidden, manipulated, or denied. It's time for accountability, Mr. President. Trump's face hardened, a storm cloud over his features. He leaned forward, voice trembling, yet fierce. You cannot call a witness against me. This is illegal. This is... But the room had shifted. Senators watched intently, the gallery was on its feet, and the television audience could sense the pivot. Support for Jasmine surged like a wave. Every word she spoke, every gesture she made, was met with murmurs of agreement, gasps, and exclamations. The tide had turned in a way that could not be ignored. The witness began speaking, detailing events with precision, naming dates, places, and actions. Each word landed like a hammer against the walls of denial Trump tried to erect. Every attempted interruption, every shout from Trump, was met with calm, undeniable testimony. The chamber, once tense and unstable, became a theater of revelation. Security remained close, anticipating volatility, yet Jasmine's poise rendered intimidation meaningless. Her calculated calm contrasted with Trump's unraveling fury, highlighting the stark difference between controlled power and chaotic aggression. By the time the witness concluded, the chamber had transformed entirely. Shouts of disbelief, gasps, and applause mingled in a chaotic electric crescendo. Reporters were shouting over each other, live feeds capturing history in real time. Millions of viewers at home were on the edge of their seats, witnessing the turning point of a confrontation that had begun as a verbal duel and had escalated into a full-blown reckoning of truth against power. Jasmine remained steady, eyes locked on Trump, letting the weight of the moment settle fully into the room. The 47th president's attempts at intimidation were no match for documented truth and unwavering courage. The battle lines were clear: rage versus reason, bluster versus integrity, denial versus evidence. And in that charged, chaotic chamber, it was undeniable. The momentum had shifted, and the nation had seen who stood unshakable in the face of fury. The witness took a deep breath, eyes steady, and began revealing details that made the air itself seem to thicken. Every word was precise, every claim backed by documents, recordings, and corroborating statements. On multiple occasions, the witness said, voice calm but carrying across the chamber with unnerving clarity, decisions were made and directives issued that directly contradict public statements and undermine both legal protocol and ethical responsibility. Every action was documented, every conversation recorded, and every attempt to conceal these actions has been preserved. The chamber froze. Senators leaned forward, some mouths agape. Reporters' pens hovered midair. Spectators in the gallery stared in disbelief, almost unable to process the gravity of the revelations. Even the cameras seemed to linger longer on Trump's face, capturing every flicker of emotion. Trump's jaw dropped for a fraction of a second, his eyes widening, a rare and brief lapse in the mask of control he wore so meticulously. The room held its breath, as if sensing the quiet before an impending storm. Then came the eruption. Trump's hands slammed onto the table with a violence that rattled pens and microphones. "Lies! You are all lying!" he roared, voice hoarse, trembling with fury and panic. "This is fabricated, concocted, invented. You will regret this, Crockett. You will pay." The chamber trembled under the force of his rage. Security flanked the table again, cautious yet alert. Staffers whispered urgently beside him, trying to maintain composure, but the president's fury had overtaken reason. The audience could see it, the desperation hidden beneath the layers of arrogance, the fear masked by bluster, now emerging in its rawest form. Jasmine's eyes never wavered. Her posture remained impeccable, her hands resting lightly on the table, voice calm but sharp as a scalpel. "Regret?" she said softly, letting the word hang in the room. "The only regret is for those who believe power can silence accountability. Every document, every witness, every indisputable fact revealed here strips away pretense. You may roar, threaten, and attempt to intimidate, but truth is neither afraid nor silenced." Trump leaned forward, voice breaking, trying to regain dominance. But every sentence he uttered was met with the same calm, unflinching opposition. The audience sensed the shift. What had begun as a verbal confrontation had transformed into a battle of moral force against raw intimidation. And in this clash, the balance had tipped. Jasmine seized the moment. She gestured to the witness, whose eyes met hers with quiet confirmation. "We have more than statements," she said. "We have records, we have proof. And as this session continues, the nation will see, unequivocally, the truth behind the decisions, the actions, and the concealment attempts." A ripple of murmurs spread across the chamber, then grew into a swell of collective awareness. Reporters shouted into microphones, broadcasting the tension live. Viewers at home felt their hearts race, their pulse quicken with every revelation. The air was electric, charged with a mix of fear, awe, and anticipation. Trump's face darkened further, muscles tensing visibly. He attempted another tirade, voice escalating. "You cannot! This is illegal! You are committing a crime!" But Jasmine was already moving forward in the battle. Each word she spoke was deliberate, measured, and strategic. "What is illegal," she countered, voice clear, "is the deliberate concealment of actions that affect the public trust, the violation of ethics, and the attempt to manipulate truth to evade accountability. Every moment you raise your voice in anger only reinforces what we have presented. Your fury proves the weight of these revelations." The chamber's energy had reached a fever pitch. Senators shifted in their seats, spectators leaned forward, and journalists scrambled to capture every nuance. Every tremor in Trump's hands, every quiver in his voice, every flash of his eyes betrayed the mounting pressure of exposure. Jasmine pressed the advantage further, leaning slightly into the intensity of the moment. "You may have titles, offices, and authority," she said, voice resolute, "but the nation, the law, and history itself do not bend to threats or intimidation. Today, the truth is no longer hidden, and you are forced to face it under the eyes of everyone watching." Trump's rage reached a crescendo, a storm of shouting, pounding, and wild gestures. Yet with every outburst, Jasmine's calm dominance became even more apparent. She did not need to shout. She did not need to threaten. Her strength lay in steadfast resolve, meticulous preparation, and moral clarity, and the nation could see it. By the time the witness concluded the final shocking revelation, the chamber was a symphony of chaos and awe. Senators, staffers, reporters, and spectators alike processed what had just unfolded, while Trump, for all his fury, remained cornered, defensive, and visibly shaken. Jasmine had seized the moment with surgical precision, turning the president's aggression into evidence of desperation, forcing him into the rarest of positions, complete defense under the relentless light of truth. In that charged, suffocating silence that followed, it was undeniable. Jasmine Crockett had not only survived the fury of a president, but she had orchestrated a turning point that left the chamber, the nation, and history itself watching with bated breath. Trump, his face flushed and eyes blazing, leaned forward aggressively. His voice, authoritative and sharp, echoed through the chamber. "I will not allow this to continue," he thundered. "As president, I command the floor, and you, Crockett, you will stop this charade immediately." He slammed his hand onto the table again, rattling papers and microphones. Security flanked him, tense, anticipating the next eruption. The room, already on edge, felt the weight of every syllable, every gesture. Senators shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some shocked by the raw intensity, others riveted by the unfolding confrontation. Jasmine Crockett did not flinch. Not a muscle in her face betrayed fear. She leaned slightly forward, eyes sharp, voice unwavering. "Power does not grant immunity, Mr. President," she said, each word deliberate, slicing through the tension like a blade. "And authority cannot silence truth. Justice cannot be muted, and the people's right to know cannot be cut off. You may try to wield titles like weapons, but they will never overpower facts." The chamber held its breath. The air was electric, charged with anticipation and awe. For a moment, time seemed to stretch as the nation watched the collision of raw authority against unflinching integrity. Trump's hands trembled slightly as he tried to regain composure. "You have no respect for the office," he shouted, voice sharp, cracking at the edges. "I am the president. My word carries weight. You cannot continue this onslaught without consequence." But Jasmine's calm, measured poise only amplified her presence. She gestured toward the documents, toward the witness, toward the meticulous evidence laid out before the chamber. Respect is earned through honesty, not intimidation. Authority is validated by accountability, not fear. And truth endures even when shouted down by the loudest voice in the room. You may try to command silence, but I will continue because the nation deserves it and history will demand it. A murmur rippled through the gallery, quickly swelling into a chorus of whispered astonishment and quiet agreement. Reporters adjusted cameras, capturing every glance, every reaction, every subtle shift in posture. Social media feeds exploded, hashtags trending within seconds. Power vs. truth. Crockett stands. Justice prevails. Trump's face contorted, a mixture of rage and disbelief. He slammed his fists on the table once more, voice escalating into a roar. I will not be humiliated in my own chamber. You will be stopped. You? Jasmine interrupted with a calm authority that seemed almost supernatural. No, Mr. President, this is not about humiliation. This is not about you. This is about accountability, transparency, and justice. And in that pursuit, no title, no office, and no roar can override the evidence before us. You can attempt to dominate with power, but power without truth is empty, and empty authority will always crumble. The chamber seemed to vibrate with tension. Senators leaned forward, whispering urgently. Spectators in the gallery gasped, clutched each other's arms, eyes wide. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every subtle flicker of doubt in Trump's eyes, every hint of exhaustion behind his furious bluster. Jasmine pressed her advantage, voice unwavering, eyes locking on the president. Every claim you make, every attempt to intimidate, only proves the significance of what is revealed. The people see it, the witnesses see it, and history will record it. Authority is fleeting, Mr. President, but truth is eternal. Trump's hands shook visibly now, a subtle tremor betraying the unraveling of composure he had fought to maintain. His attempts to dominate the chamber through sheer presence were crumbling under the relentless clarity of Jasmine's words. The battle had transformed. It was no longer a verbal duel, nor a confrontation of tempers. It had become a symbolic clash. Raw power versus moral certainty, intimidation versus undeniable truth, titles versus justice. Every member of the chamber, every reporter, every viewer at home could feel it. The momentum had shifted irreversibly. Jasmine's calm authority contrasted sharply with Trump's unraveling fury. Each measured statement, each deliberate gesture reinforced her position. She did not raise her voice. She did not yell. She let the weight of reason, evidence, and courage speak louder than any presidential shout. By the time the chamber realized the magnitude of what was unfolding, the tide was clear. The nation, millions strong watching live, witnessed an epic confrontation that transcended politics. It was a battle of principle, a fight for accountability, and a demonstration that courage and truth could withstand even the most formidable displays of raw authority. In that moment, the chamber, the nation, and the world understood the stakes. Trump's attempts to assert dominance had been met and countered, and the battle lines were drawn clearly. One side wielded unchecked power, the other wielded unwavering truth. And the outcome of this clash would shape the perception of justice for generations to come. Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, her fingers lightly brushing the stack of documents before her. With a deliberate calm, she slid the next folder across the polished oak table, the movement smooth, almost ceremonial. Mr. President, she said, voice steady yet resonant, this is incontrovertible, evidence that leaves no room for denial, no space for evasion, no possibility of reinterpretation. Every claim you have made publicly is contradicted by the records before us. Trump's eyes narrowed, a flash of panic briefly overtaking his usual arrogance. That's fake. It's fabricated. You're trying to destroy me, he barked, voice rising, hands slamming onto the table again. Microphones rattled, papers fluttered, and the chamber seemed to vibrate with the intensity of his fury. But Jasmine's gaze never wavered. Her calm presence was magnetic, commanding, and terrifying in its precision. Fabricated? She repeated softly, letting the word hang in the room like a scalpel poised above flesh. Every document has been verified, every witness cross-examined, every action recorded. These are not accusations. They are facts. And facts, Mr. President, are immutable. Cameras swiveled instantly, zooming in as reporters leaned forward, pens frozen mid-note. The chamber's energy surged, a mix of awe, fear, and mounting anticipation. Every eye, every lens, captured the unfolding moment as history itself seemed to pause, waiting for the next revelation. Trump attempted to deflect, raising his voice, gesturing wildly. "This is political theater, a trap. You're orchestrating a circus." His words, however, lacked substance. The more he shouted, the more evident his disorientation became. Fingers fidgeted, jaw clenched, shoulders tensed. Each gesture betrayed the strain of trying to maintain dominance in a confrontation meticulously engineered against him. Jasmine's calm was surgical. She leaned slightly closer, eyes locked on his, and continued. "The witnesses corroborate every detail. The recordings confirm every conversation. The timeline matches every public statement you've made and contradicts them entirely. You can rage, you can shout, but you cannot alter what has been preserved, documented, and verified." A subtle shiver passed through the chamber. Senators, aides, and reporters alike could sense the shift in momentum. Trump's voice wavered slightly, a tremor betraying his attempt to cling to control. The audience at home, millions strong, watched as the 47th president's visage began to crack under pressure. His famous bravado, carefully constructed over decades, showed visible fractures. Jasmine pressed the advantage further. "Look closely," she said, sliding another document into view. "Notice the discrepancies between the public narrative and the documented reality. Notice how attempts to obscure facts unravel under scrutiny. Notice the pattern of evasion, of contradiction, of concealment. And notice, despite every attempt to intimidate, to bully, to silence, we stand here unafraid, armed only with truth." Trump's response was frantic, a mix of shouting and gesturing that grew increasingly chaotic. "This is ridiculous. It's lies, lies, lies." Yet every exclamation, every movement, seemed only to highlight the gaps in his defense. Cameras captured the subtle quiver in his lips, the tightening of his jaw, the flare of nostrils as anger collided with fear. Jasmine remained poised, unyielding, letting the evidence speak louder than words. "You see, Mr. President," she said quietly, each syllable deliberate, "facts have a way of exposing those who wield authority without accountability. And in this room, with the nation watching, you are forced to confront the truth in a way that no amount of yelling can obscure." The chamber was electric. The air seemed to hum with tension. Every microphone, every camera, every witness amplifying the moment. Trump's usual dominance had evaporated, leaving only the raw, unfiltered reaction of a man cornered by reality. As the final document slid into view, the camera caught his face in excruciating detail, a mixture of fury, disbelief, and fear, contorted in ways both human and deeply revealing. The room erupted into whispers, gasps, and stunned murmurs. Reporters shouted over each other to broadcast the unprecedented scene live. The nation at home watched, riveted, heartbeats quickened by the sight of raw power meeting unassailable truth. Jasmine leaned back slightly, her calm a stark contrast to the storm before her. The first decisive strike had landed. The momentum, unmistakably, had shifted further. The battle was far from over. But one thing was clear. The narrative had changed, and Trump had been cornered in a way that history would not soon forget. And yet, Jasmine had more to reveal. She straightened, her gaze sweeping across the chamber with an unflinching intensity. "The time for obfuscation is over," she began, voice steady, measured, resonating with authority. "The veil of deceit that has been maintained for years will no longer shield misrepresentation from scrutiny. Every decision, every action, every word that contradicts the truth will be laid bare." A murmur ran through the room, subtle at first, then growing louder. Senators exchanged glances, aides stiffened, and the gallery seemed to lean in collectively, as if drawn by an invisible force toward the unfolding spectacle. Cameras pivoted, capturing every nuance, every tremor in Trump's posture. Millions at home held their breath, glued to screens that transmitted history in real time. Jasmine opened a large binder, sliding it across the table. She spoke deliberately, letting each word land like a hammer. We begin with the inconsistencies in public statements, recorded, verified, and cross-referenced against actions and directives. Every attempt to mislead, every effort to obfuscate is documented here. Trump's eyes narrowed, fists clenching at the edges of the table. His voice rose sharply, a desperate attempt to dominate the room. Fabrication, lies, this is politically motivated. You are attempting a coup. But Jasmine was already several steps ahead. She let the evidence speak for itself, pointing to charts, documents, and recordings with precision. This is not politics. This is accountability. And it is undeniable. You may shout, you may gesture, you may attempt to dominate through intimidation, but the truth cannot be shouted down. It cannot be silenced. And today it will be witnessed by the world. The chamber seemed to tremble under the weight of her words. Trump leaned forward, voice shaking slightly, attempting another barrage of accusations, but each was countered immediately, decisively, by the meticulous evidence Jasmine presented. Every contradiction, every evasive maneuver, every hidden agenda was illuminated, stripped bare in front of millions of eyes. Reporters scrambled to keep pace, live feeds cutting across networks internationally. Social media erupted within seconds. Clips of Jasmine presenting evidence went viral, hashtags trending in real time. Either truth exposed, Crockett unstoppable, accountability now. Every corner of the globe seemed to be watching, sharing, reacting. The narrative had exploded beyond the chamber walls, reaching hearts and minds worldwide. Trump's facade began to crumble visibly. The arrogance that had so often served as armor now revealed cracks, then fissures, and finally gaping holes. His words, once forceful and commanding, faltered under the relentless tide of truth. A bead of sweat traced down his temple. A subtle tremor betrayed his agitation, and the eyes that had once gleamed with unyielding confidence now flickered with panic. Jasmine pressed on. And now the hidden communications, the attempts to manipulate internal processes, the deliberate efforts to suppress information that the public had a right to know. Everything is here. Every email, every memo, every directive that contradicts public assurances has been preserved, cataloged, and verified. Nothing remains unexamined. The chamber was hypnotized. Senators leaned forward, some gripping the arms of their chairs. The gallery erupted in low gasps, whispered exclamations, and stunned silence at moments of revelation. Cameras captured every twitch of expression, every tightening of jaw, every flush of color across Trump's face. Millions at home witnessed the unraveling of a once dominant figure, cornered and exposed. Trump's attempts to interject became more erratic. You are destroying the country. You cannot do this. It is illegal. Illegal. Yet his words carried less weight with every new revelation. Each denial seemed hollow, a futile attempt to mask the evidence arrayed against him. Jasmine, calm, collected, and resolute, countered each claim with surgical precision, letting the documentation and testimony carry the full force of the argument. The turning point came when Jasmine presented video evidence, sequences of statements and actions juxtaposed, highlighting glaring contradictions. The chamber went silent, a collective intake of breath echoing in the stillness. Trump's face, caught on camera and broadcast simultaneously to millions, was a portrait of desperation and fear, an image that would become iconic in the unfolding saga. Jasmine's voice, unwavering, concluded the presentation. There is no room for misrepresentation, no hiding behind titles, no evasion through rhetoric, no intimidation that can obscure these truths. The nation has witnessed, the world has observed, and history will record this moment. The layers of deception have been lifted, and what remains is undeniable. Accountability cannot be evaded, and justice cannot be silenced. The chamber, once a battlefield of words and threats, had transformed into a theater of revelation. The power dynamics had shifted irrevocably. Trump, for all his titles and authority, was exposed, overwhelmed by the weight of undeniable evidence. Jasmine Crockett, unwavering and resolute, stood as the embodiment of truth, guiding the nation and the world through a confrontation that transcended politics. It was a reckoning, a moment of clarity, and a testament to courage under fire. Every eye, every lens, every network broadcast the same scene: the unraveling of authority when faced with unassailable truth, and the ascendance of integrity, precision, and courage in the person of Jasmine Crockett. In that electrified silence, the world understood. The battle was no longer speculative. The truth had been laid bare, and Trump's defenses had collapsed under the relentless light of evidence. Jasmine had not only landed the decisive blow, she had exposed the very core of deception, leaving the chamber, the nation, and the world watching history in the making. Jasmine Crockett stood tall, shoulders squared, eyes ablaze with a fierce, unwavering light. Every movement was purposeful, every breath measured, as if the weight of the moment had crystallized her into a figure both monumental and human. The room, still trembling from the aftermath of her revelations, seemed to orbit around her presence. She had become more than a person in that instant. She was a symbol, an embodiment of truth made manifest. Trump, in contrast, seemed to shrink under the intensity. The fire in his eyes flickered and dimmed, replaced by exhaustion, disbelief, and a raw, unguarded vulnerability rarely witnessed by the public. His shoulders slumped, hands gripping the edge of the table for support, jaw tight, lips pressed into a thin line. He opened his mouth as if to argue, to roar, to reclaim some fragment of authority. But no words came. His voice had been swallowed by the force of undeniable truth, leaving him exposed, silent, and utterly defeated. The gallery erupted in a mixture of astonishment, elation, and relief. Whispers surged into cheers, then into sustained applause that shook the chamber's very walls. Some spectators were on their feet, clapping, shouting, wiping tears from eyes that had watched hope and justice collide with raw power. Others simply stared, mouths agape, hearts pounding at the enormity of what had unfolded. Cameras swiveled, capturing every angle: Jasmine's composed triumph, Trump's rare vulnerability, the stunned faces of senators and aides. Every frame broadcast across the nation carried the electric energy of history in motion. Jasmine's gaze swept the room. Her voice, calm yet resonant, cut through the lingering echoes of chaos. This is not about one person. It is about accountability. It is about justice. It is about ensuring that those who wield power do so in the light of truth, not in the shadow of fear. The chamber seemed to hold its breath again, hanging on each word, drinking in the gravity of the declaration. Reporters, scribes, and cameras captured every syllable, every pause, every glimmer of defiance and triumph in her eyes. Millions at home leaned forward in unison, hearts tight with the tension of witnessing history, and the relief that justice, however momentary, had asserted itself. Trump finally moved, slow and reluctant, lowering his head almost imperceptibly. The gesture was subtle, yet monumental. It was not just the acknowledgement of defeat, it was the acknowledgement that no amount of title, no layer of bravado, no bluster could shield him from the exposure of truth meticulously laid bare. His silence spoke volumes, resonating louder than any words could. The gallery's reaction was overwhelming. Tears streamed down faces, hands clutched together in gratitude or awe, some shouting Jasmine's name, others unable to speak for the raw emotion coursing through them. The nation watched, riveted, as a battle that had been waged in words and evidence reached its climax. Not in destruction, but in revelation. The balance had shifted, and a new standard had been set. Jasmine straightened her posture, lifting her chin slightly, eyes sweeping across the chamber once more. She did not gloat. She did not taunt. Her triumph was measured, righteous, and precise. It was a victory not for personal glory, but for principle, integrity, and the unwavering commitment to the rule of law. Every line of her body, every glance she offered, communicated the weight and responsibility of the moment. The international media exploded with coverage. Headlines flashed across screens worldwide. Truth prevails in historic confrontation. Jasmine Crockett stands unshaken. A new era of accountability. Social media feeds were flooded with clips, screenshots, and analyses. Millions dissected each movement, each expression, each word that had unfolded over hours of confrontation. The ripple effect was immediate and unstoppable. And yet, even in victory, Jasmine's eyes held a glimmer of something larger. This was more than a personal triumph. It was a spark, a seed planted in the consciousness of a nation. The chamber had witnessed the fall of arrogance before truth, but the story was far from over. There was work to be done, lessons to be carried forward, and a movement to inspire. She had won the battle, yes, but she had ignited the possibility of a broader revolution of accountability, a cultural shift toward justice that would not be easily extinguished. Trump remained seated, shoulders slumped, silent, his expression a stark counterpoint to Jasmine's radiant authority. Every effort at defiance had been neutralized, every claim dismantled, every attempt to dominate rendered moot. And as Jasmine looked out at the gallery, at the chamber, and through the cameras to the millions beyond, the message was clear. Truth, courage, and resolve could withstand even the most formidable displays of power. The applause swelled again, not just for a victory in a chamber, but for the affirmation that one determined individual could challenge authority, confront deception, and catalyze change on a scale that resonated far beyond the room itself. Jasmine had not only defeated Trump in this confrontation, she had illuminated a path forward, a vision of justice that dared others to rise, to act, and to hold power accountable. As the chamber slowly quieted, the echoes of cheers lingering, Jasmine Crockett stood, unwavering, a figure of determination and hope. Trump's silence was complete. The battle had ended, not with spectacle, but with revelation, conviction, and the quiet, undeniable force of truth. The world had watched history unfold, and the reverberations would be felt for generations. Jasmine had not simply won, she had awakened a movement, left a mark on the conscience of the nation, and sparked the potential for a new era of justice. In the end, it was not power, titles, or fear that shaped history, but courage, truth, and unwavering integrity. Jasmine Crockett's stand reminds us that one person, guided by conscience and justice, can illuminate even the darkest corners of deceit. Every act of honesty, every moment of moral clarity plants a seed for a better world. Let this story inspire us to confront falsehoods, defend what is right, and live with the bravery to speak truth, even when the stakes are high. In doing so, we shape a legacy far greater than ourselves. If this battle stirred something in you, don't scroll. Sit with it, share it, talk about it, like, comment, and send it to someone who still believes courage and truth deserve to be heard. Subscribe to Harrison Stories, where no injustice goes unnoticed. Hit the bell, because the next fight isn't polite, it's relentless, and it might just change the way you see power. This story is a fictional dramatization inspired by real courage and real corruption. Any resemblance to actual people or events is coincidental or symbolic for reflection and critique. Thanks for watching. Justice isn't given, it's claimed. This is Harrison Stories.